Saludos, bienvenidos, everyone. This is Santiago Tábara. I'm a journalist based in Washington, D.C. And here we are with the Green Party presidential candidate, Dr. Jill Stein. Thank you, Dr. Stein, for taking the time to talk to us
It's
in
an
this
honor.
virtual press conference and speak with this group of Latin American journalists from different outlets. And some of them are independent, freelance. So we're going to introduce you now. Dr. Jill Stein is a Jewish woman, a Harvard-educated doctor, an environmental health advocate. She has stated she believes in attaining the presidency without relying on what she calls war machine dollars. Her campaign is on the ballot in 38 states, plus 8 more writing campaigns, and their supporters believe they have a path to win enough electoral college votes. And on the month of September of the year, her party was still working to secure ballot access in several states. Jill Stein has run for president 3 times, including her 2024 bid. Recently, she announced her pick for vice president to be Butch Ware, a historian Black Muslim, fact that makes a truly historic ticket in U.S. politics. Dr. Stein has made Gaza ceasefire one of the main pillars of her platform. Dr. Stein, welcome, and you have 3 minutes to introduce yourself to the Latino voters and to the voters in general. Many of them are still undecided and disappointed with the two-party, as you know, two-party political system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here with you. I am a mother and a medical doctor, and I describe myself as a mother on fire, working to make the world safe for my children and all children, because none of them are safe until all of them are safe. And I am, after many decades as a practicing physician, practicing clinical medicine, I say that now I'm practicing political medicine because it's the mother of all illnesses. That is our sick political system, which is delivering for the economic and political elites, but not for everyday people. We have a crisis now in virtually every dimension of our lives for everyday people, for working people, for immigrant families. We do not have the health care that people deserve in a nation as wealthy as ours. Healthcare should be a human right, and virtually all other developed nations provide that. We should have housing, affordable housing, as a human right. But half of all Americans right now are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. We should have food security as a human right, education as a right, including free public higher education and freedom from debt. We need a system of migration that respects the dignity of all individuals who are coming here. And I'll just say a couple words about that briefly. We believe that the most important thing we can do to fix the crisis of migration is to stop causing it in the first place through so many misguided U.S. policies. We can say more about that over the course of this discussion, but I wanted you to know that we repudiate and we criticize the current approach of the two major parties to immigration, this policy which demonizes migrants. We believe migrants are the source of security and safety and actual health of our communities, not the opposite, which is what the other two major candidates are saying right now. And the last thing I'll say is that the crisis now in Gaza, the genocide that's being committed by Israel with the support and partnership of the United States, committed in our name, is a moral outrage, but it's also a serious failing of our foreign policy with real consequences here at home. This is part of our bloated war machine, our endless war machine, also called the military-industrial complex, which is using up half of our congressional dollars a full half of our congressional budget is spent on this endless war machine that results in wars like what's going on in Gaza right now. That money is needed here at home. We are the one campaign that will cut this bloated, dangerous military budget and put those dollars, much of those dollars, about half of them, into real security here at home with healthcare, housing, education, a dignified policy of migration, and real climate action as an emergency. So I give you that as a basic overview. One last thing I'll say, which is that as a third party, we're often told that we are stealing votes. Our view is that politicians have to earn your vote, and that they cannot tell you or blame you or shame you. They have to earn your vote. They're not entitled to your vote. And having been at the border in the Rio Grande Valley just about 2 weeks ago, we saw how much the people are hurting along the border, feeling like they have been abandoned by both political parties. And there's enormous interest in a new political force that actually works for us, the people, and delivers for everyday people, for migrant communities, for communities of color, the essentials that we need. Instead of allowing the rich to get richer, the billionaires have basically doubled their wealth in the last 2 to 3 years, while child poverty tripled over that same time. So we offer people a different way forward. We're not bought and paid for. We don't take money from the war machines and big industry and the fossil fuel developers and the border security and prison system. We don't take that money. So we really represent the needs of everyday people who deserve a government working for all of us.
Thank you very much for your words, Dr. Stein. And now we go straight with the questions. Each journalist will have around 5 minutes to ask any question regarding the economy, immigration, Latin American relations, environment, foreign policy, and ongoing geopolitical tensions. I will start by asking you, Dr. Stein, that as a Jewish activist and presidential candidate, why did you decide to select Professor Bachwell, a Muslim convert, as your running mate?
First of all, I selected him because he is a very powerful spokesperson for a human rights agenda. He and I seem to come from the same, political perspective, a perspective that empowers everyday people and that believes that we need to hold our government accountable and we should be spending our tax dollars and our resources on everyday people, not on the war machine. So we found that we basically had very similar policy priorities. But in addition, as a Muslim man, he, together with myself as a Jewish white woman, and he's a Muslim Black man, obviously, and I'm a Jewish white woman, we kind of have the bases covered on many of the controversies out there in the world, but especially related to the Middle East, and to the Gaza genocide. He also, by the way, is a history professor. And as a medical doctor myself, I'm very focused on the day-to-day and don't have a huge fund of knowledge on history. He's got a huge fund of knowledge on history, and his special area of interest actually is on genocide and revolution. So his expertise is extremely relevant to where we are now, and I find that between the two of us, it's an extremely enriching and lively conversation, and I very much value working with him. He's been an incredible asset. It's as if he's been preparing for this his whole life, but he's never set foot in the realm of politics whatsoever. And he's very charismatic, powerful speaker, and just a great companion to be overturning our political system with. So we're very excited about the energy coming into our campaign now.
Thank you. My second final question is, you have said, and I quote, it's time to reject the so-called lesser evil and vote for a greater good. Why do you consider yourself a graduate in comparison with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris?
We do not bash immigrants, for one thing. We do not support the endless war machine, which is, as Martin Luther King said, my country is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. That was true in the 1960s, and it's all the more true right now. So we don't embrace that dark side, with which both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are all for. We support our civil liberties and our constitutional rights, and Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and both of their parties are at war with our civil liberties and our civil rights right now, with our right to free speech, with our right to protest, for redress of grievances, for our right to freedom from surveillance and intrusive inspection, especially along the border into the US, but everywhere actually across the country. We do not support cop cities, which both other parties support. These are these very militarized institutions, these police training institutions, where it's the Israeli Defense Forces commonly that are coming over and training our police in very abusive techniques. You may be aware that, or you may not, that the draft has been reactivated in this country. It's not in effect, but it has been reconstituted, and people are put in that database right now and could be sent off to war next week. We are on the verge of an exploding war in the Middle East, which could become very big, could go global, even could go nuclear. And it would not be a surprise. Biden has already said he will be sending boots on the ground. He already has. We could easily see the draft reenacted. So all of these things that are a real threat to the health and welfare of the people. For myself and Dr. Ware, these are the greater evils right now that are impoverishing us and endangering us in this country and around the world. We are the alternative to that. We are the greater good, which is about protecting, preserving, and advancing our human rights, international law, diplomacy, and essentially the social and infrastructure services that allow us to be, the best nation and community that we can be. So on all those counts, we feel like we are that greater good, and we entirely stand in opposition to the two greater evil candidates, and it ought to be a slam dunk. In our view, no one should be voting for genocide in this race. No one should be voting for World War III. And if you cast a vote for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, you're running into both of those just absolute devastating crises.
Thank you, Dr. Stein. And now we're going to invite the next journalist, Melissa. Please introduce yourself, and you have a couple of questions for the candidate. Thank you, Melissa.
Hello, good morning.
Hi.
Thank you for having us. We are so excited to hear more about yourself, and to like to welcome to know the press in Mexico and everyone to know more about you, because we know more about like how everyone thinks like the U.S. is kind of like bipartisan like country. We don't know as much as about another type of parties that we, like everyone else, it's kind of hard, even if you live there. I think like for some people it doesn't know about exist another parties as yours. So could you explain to us how the U.S. two-party system works for parties as yours, and the challenges it poses to grow as a meaningful political force?
Yes. So as the Green Party, we are a people-powered alternative. We are not bought and paid for by corporate America, by Wall Street, by the war machine. And this is not some like lunatic fringe idea. This is what the American people are screaming for. And polls have shown for many years that the American people have been calling for a political party that can represent the public interest, as opposed to the economic elites that have been throwing working people, communities of color, vulnerable people under the bus, immigrants, for a long time, for a very long time in this country, but worsening especially in the last 1 to 2 decades, and working people in particular, that are really struggling in this country. Our system, is a duopoly. There are 2 parties that get the big money that are really entrenched, and it is quite challenging to be seen and heard and to challenge this endless, reckless war machine that they constitute. This is my 3rd run for president. I started in 2012, and over that time, I have seen us really begin to emerge to where people now really recognize us as the major political alternative. We are alternative in many ways, in that we do not take the big money. You cannot write $1 million check for our campaign. You can write $1 million check if you have the money. You can do that for Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and RFK and even Chase Oliver, the libertarian. They all use these legalized loopholes for corruption. And so it's legalized corruption, but it's corruption. It enables big money to basically win the day. So it's a great challenge for us to be seen and heard. They make the rules like ballot access very hard. We have to collect a million signatures. If you're starting from the beginning and you're not already grandfathered in, you have to collect 1 million signatures, spend a lot of money to do that. We're generally blocked out of mainstream media. We've been crawling our way up into mainstream media. Now the Democrats have felt like they have to smear us with a commercial, with an ad, a TV ad for the first time, which is a great mark of distinction. It's a badge of honor that we are that much of a threat. And we've been working our way into bigger media coverage. The more the Democrats smear us, the more it backfires against them. So we've been getting smeared by the head of the Democratic National Committee, by AOC, the noted member of the squad, Mehdi Hassan, and others who are kind of attack dogs for the Democratic Party have been giving us a lot of promotion and publicity. So because we represent...
That's a good for you, right? Because it's kind of hard to like surviving between, like not having a lot of like that money for them to be everywhere, right? It's kind of like the media and the things that you can see like popping up in every state. But for you, I guess that will be even hard, right? And also, like, I would like to ask you about what would you do to change the electoral college? Because this is the thing that is for us is different, like democracy for us works in a different way. So I guess for you, like the electoral college system, without affecting representation, of course, in the less populated states. And do you believe that getting rid of it for good will have an effect on democracy in the United States?
It would be helpful because the Electoral College gives extra representation basically to Southern and conservative states, and it leads to many problems, so that we're not, politicians, and I don't mean like myself, I don't regard myself, I'm an anti-politician, not a politician, but the representatives of the economic elites, they target strictly the swing states because with the Electoral College, it's not one vote that counts. It's those Electoral College votes, and it leads to a system whereby candidates are targeting just swing states, but it needs to be every state, which is equally important. The Electoral College isn't the only problem, and just fixing that won't fix the system unless we also put public financing back in and limit private dollars that can buy out our elections. We need to have debates. We need to have access to the public airwaves and to require participation in debates so that the American people can be informed about who their candidates are, and to actually understand what their policies are. And we need changes in ballot access rules so that, the Democrats hired an army of lawyers in order to throw us off the ballot, and we've been in court. We've mostly won those cases, There's only one that we have lost so far. There are another one or two that are pending, but we lost 1 out of 5 so far. So we've won most of them. But this is what they
like
do.
one of the things that is hard for people, right? I think it's like more of the things to start to understand where it's coming from. And I don't think people even like have a knowledge about how the system works, you know, even for that to, that's what I think like that will be a challenge for you. And I think it's allowed for like many, I don't know how many, it's been a long time, for so many years, the electoral college. The democracy works different for us, even of the years, you know, like you've been president here in Mexico. But regarding that you telling us about how you've been a candidate before, right? So regarding about that, we want to know about in the U.S. politics the nadir effect. What do you think about the possibility of Donald Trump winning the election? Do people having to vote it? For you, that will be have otherwise voted for Kamala Harris, and has as it happened with Hillary Clinton before in 2016, or when over in 2000 elections.
So let me say, elections are about competition. Candidates are supposed to compete for votes. The Democrats, yeah, and they create this myth that they own your vote. They don't own your vote. They have to earn your vote. And so they engage in voter blaming and shaming to try to extort your vote, you know, to compel your vote out of fear, to call candidates spoilers who compete for votes. Well, we're supposed to compete for votes. Yes. Well, and let me say, third-party candidates mostly give people a reason to vote who otherwise wouldn't vote. And if you actually looked at the exit polls from 2016, almost all of our voters, a near supermajority of our voters, otherwise would not have voted. They were not Democratic voters that were coming over to vote for us, but even that would have been okay. But that's actually not what happened. Greens largely bring people in to vote who otherwise aren't going to vote. In the last presidential election, 1 out of every 3 eligible voters in this country did not vote. 1 out of 3. That's a huge number. And who are those? They are younger, lower income, and of color, the people who are being thrown under the bus, the very people that our agenda speaks to. So to say that we are stealing votes, no, we're mostly empowering votes. We're inspiring votes. That's mostly what we do. And the other thing the Democrats don't want you to think about, and this is a distraction, what they have lost this time around, especially, I mean, a lot of votes, youth vote, but in particular, you know, and the youth vote is hard to get under many circumstances, but youth are extremely skeptical right now. But in particular, it's the Muslim vote and the Arab American vote, where the community has very specifically declared they are not voting Democrat, nor Republican for that matter. They're not voting for either. Now, they have now largely endorsed, many of their organizations are endorsing our campaign because we are the only anti-genocide campaign, anti-genocide pro-worker campaign across the country. But for them, you know, it's the anti-genocide that especially matters, but our agendas converge in other ways too. They have a big social justice emphasis within their community as well. But on the issue of Gaza, especially, and genocide, they are not voting for Democrats, especially Democrats, because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are killing their relatives, and they are not happy about that at all. So they are decidedly anti-democratic right now. They are not voting for Kamala Harris. If Kamala Harris pledged, and in fact, right now, initiated a weapons embargo to Israel, she would demonstrate her, you know, her worth to that community and would earn back a lot of those votes. But she doesn't want to do that. They would rather lose the election than stop the genocide. And that's the problem. The problem is within their control. They're trying to externalize it so they don't have to talk about the issue, because they know that what the American people want is to end this genocide. So, you know, they want to serve their big donors, is who they're serving, you know, including AIPAC and the War Machine. So that's where their policy is coming from. And they are trying to fuzzy that up by saying that we're stealers. No, we're not stealers and we're not spoilers. We're giving people a way to stop this genocide. And that is the issue. And they're trying to distract from that by talking about, stealing votes. We didn't steal those votes. Those votes are not going to them, and they could get those votes back right now if they
Yeah,
wanted.
it's
Thank you,
always like
Melissa.
a contradiction
Yes.
about that.
Melissa,
Sorry,
we're going to pass the next journalist, Edward. Edward, yeah.
Well,
And then
thank you so much
we
for
have the second
having
round.
me.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we'll have time for, I hope, another round of questions. Edward, please go ahead.
Hello. Thank
Hello.
you very much for doing this. Can you hear me good?
I hear you great. Great to meet you,
Okay.
Edward.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, as you were saying, the Democratic National Committee released this television ad against you, saying that a vote for Stein is really a vote for Trump, right? My question is, how can you convince progressive voters who are afraid of Donald Trump to vote for you, that a vote for you is useful for them?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's basically amounts to sharing what our agenda is about, that we offer healthcare as a human right for everyone through a Medicare for All system, that we will cut the military budget and put those dollars, about $500 billion worth, back into our urgent needs here at home. Quality schools, bringing up the floor for K through 12 schools so that there is equity across the country, that the quality of your education and your school system doesn't depend on your zip code. Provide public higher education for free. That we will close the private prisons and the detention centers for migrants. And in fact, that we will end the detention of migrants. We will offload the migration crisis by ending the U.S. policies that are driving the migration crisis. So this, in particular, benefits the migrant community and also the communities that back home, for us not to be committing endless regime change operations and wars and economic domination. We overturned the government of Haiti twice by basically deporting Aristide twice. And after he was gotten rid of, in came the Hillary Clinton Secretary of State office and reversed the minimum wage referendum that raised wages in Haiti from 30 to 60 cents an hour. She reversed it. So it went from 60 cents back down to 30 cents an hour. This kind of economic devastation, the continuing climate crisis, and the US under Democrats as well as Republicans keep driving that crisis. There are shades of gray between them, but the Democrats are equally culpable. We could go into that if there's time. But we are not addressing the climate crisis nor our historic burden to support climate justice and climate reparations and climate adaptation south of the border. So we have millions of farmers who are fleeing because they've been put out of business by drought. So there are many things we can do. We can legalize marijuana and cannabis and help undercut the drug cartels, whose violence is also driving people into this country to flee the drug violence. We can stop the economic sanctions like in Venezuela and Cuba, which are also driving many migrants across the border. By reducing the drivers of migration, we greatly decompress the problem. And some of that could happen right away, like legalizing cannabis on day one, for example, and beginning to treat the drug issue as a public health problem, not a criminal problem. By legalizing, we basically withdraw the profits and the economic power of the drug cartels. So there's a lot we can do right away to decompress the violence and the instability and the misery that's driving the climate crisis. I'm sorry, the migration crisis. Hold the line just 1 minute. I'm in a hotel and someone is knocking at the door. Just 1 minute. So in addition, we would get rid of the wall, which doesn't help, and just wastes billions of dollars, and treat the migrants who are coming here with dignity, do background checks, have the civil infrastructure to, check the records, make sure we're not looking at hardened criminals that are Sorry, I am being called to the door here again. Just one moment, please. Confusion about our checkout time. Sorry about that. So your question was, how do we speak to people who are concerned about Trump and convey what we would deliver, correct?
Yes, but actually it's more like if you see the pollings, when Democrats say that a vote for you is a vote for Trump because they are you are like stealing votes to the Democrats, it was like more or less like to talk about this issue. Yeah.
Okay, so I can focus on that part because it's both what we offer that makes people want to vote for us, but it's also addressing that fear. And I think you're talking about the fear component of this, the fear that would keep people from voting. So what we point out is that, many of the things that Trump is doing is exactly what the Democrats are doing. They're very harsh and immigrant bashing rhetoric. It's the Democrats now who are also saying that immigrants are bringing drugs across the border, are bringing crime, and all this is not true. The statistics show migrants are actually far less prone to crime, make our communities actually safer, are not bringing drugs. It's red-blooded Americans who are bringing drugs. And in fact, that migrants expand our economy. And if they're allowed to work, if they get their papers, that migrants are a huge resource to our communities. So Democrats are basically in lockstep with the Republicans in their assault on the migrant community and, bringing back private prisons and detention centers and so on, separating kids from parents and confining kids in detention centers. So the Democrats are just as much to fear as the Republicans in terms of treatment of migrants, in terms of the war on our civil liberties, in terms of abusive police practices. So we hear a lot from the Democrats about how scary and terrible the Republicans are, but the Republicans, while they're not saying it, the Democrats are equally scary and oppressive. So there are shades of gray between them. But, if you look at in particular where we're going with the war machine, and that's especially under the leadership of the Democrats, that we are exhausting our budget on these endless military expenditures. And we are on the verge of World War III in the Middle East right now. We're looking at boots on the ground and the reenactment of the draft. So all of this puts us at risk. The practices of the Democrats, just like the practices and policies of the Republicans, are extremely dangerous. We're looking at rising fascism, endless war, potentially going into a World War III type situation, and nuclear, and reactivating the draft. So there is just as much for the migrant community and the Latino community or Hispanic community, Chicano, whatever term you want to use. There is reason for people to be very concerned about where we're going under Democratic rule as much as under Republican rule. And our campaign is the one alternative that will not be embroiling us in endless and devastating wars, squandering our budget, and making mincemeat out of our civil liberties with these cop cities and repressive local policing. So we are the alternative that people are really looking for.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eduard. And now next we have Aiza. Please go ahead.
Let's see. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I don't know if Aiza is there. Aiza?
Yes.
Now we hear you.
Thank you.
Great.
Hi, thank you for being with us today, Dr. Gil. I would like to know, you said you are the alternative, but speaking about Latin America, what do you propose to put an end to the blockade and the economic sanctions against Cuba and Venezuela. You spoke about that.
Right.
Could
Yeah.
you speak more, please?
Yes. So, to the full extent that this is under executive control, we will be pushing to abolish these sanctions as quickly as possible. These sanctions, are considered a form of alternative warfare. They are against international law. And it's actually something like 1/3 of the world's population right now is under sanctions by the US government. So, this is a very destructive way of pursuing, our foreign policy, and it needs to be brought to an end. The US has had, a foreign policy of regime change. We have conducted some 80 regime change operations since the Second World War. That's been well documented. According to the Congressional Research Service, we have sent the military in, largely on this continent, but not only on this continent, some 250 times in the last 30 years. So we have an extremely aggressive foreign policy. As Martin Luther King said, my country is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. And it was true in the 1960s, and it's very true now. And these policies are not serving us well. The Pentagon described its policy with the term full spectrum dominance. And that means dominating in the military sphere, in the economic, dominating the use of resources, dominating in cyberspace, dominating on the battlefield, on land, in cyberspace, in outer space. Domination has been the name of the game. And the use of economic sanctions is part of the tools that we use in order to dominate. And we're basically calling for a wholesale revision of US policy, foreign policy, so that it is based on international law, human rights, and diplomacy, not on raw economic and military power. So we will be conducting a full court press if we are in that position, if we are so lucky as to be in the White House. We will be using the full force of the bully pulpit as well as congressional hearings to bring back that institution, which has really deteriorated in this country, to help educate the public so the public can hold their elected officials accountable, and we can move into a 21st century form of foreign policy in a multipolar world. The US is accustomed to being, the monopolar dominant force in the world. And the sanctions are just one of those tools that needs to be a part of a wholesale reboot of our foreign policy.
Dr. Stein, do you think American people is ready to have a woman as a president of the United States?
Yes, I do think so. There was so much, I think, relief and interest when Joe Biden was removed and Kamala Harris was brought in, just because she was a woman, had a fresh face, but I think being a woman had a lot to do with that, in the same way that Mexico's president, I think people are ready for women's leadership right now. I think women bring something very important. Not all women and not all the time, that's for sure. There are a lot of war hawks out there among women, and Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton, I think, are examples of those, women who do not bring a greater understanding or sensitivity to the needs of women worldwide than the needs of women and children. But I think there's kind of a set of humanitarian and community values that many women understand and prioritize. And I think that America is very ready for this. And I will say that, again, while Kamala Harris looked like a hopeful face initially as her policies and her style, her sort of word salad style and her refusal to commit to a policy, her shape-shifting depending on political circumstances, I think that's been a big turnoff for people, and her poll numbers are suffering, and it's really too bad because people are kind of desperate. They're mostly denied knowledge that there is an alternative out there, and people are really hungry for it. And we're seeing, a huge surge of interest in our campaign right now, because I think that what we've got on the table is just not speaking to people whatsoever. And absolutely. I think that the qualities that women bring to public office are very much, much more appreciated now, and the roadblocks are not as stiff as they have been in the past.
Thank
The
you,
last question?
Aisa. You have another question? Or?
Yeah, I would like to know how you consider is now the American economy, how people live, what about the inflation and all the things that Biden's administration has done for economy. How's your evaluation, please?
People are really struggling. You can see it in statistics like that child poverty tripled, that 63%, something like that, are living paycheck to paycheck. Huge numbers of people who cannot afford their health care. If you get cancer now in this country, the odds are over 40% that you're going to exhaust your life savings within 2 years because of the outrageous costs of our healthcare system that people just cannot afford. We have a climate crisis, everywhere, as you well know. But recently we got hit by these back-to-back hurricanes in the Southeast, and FEMA, the relief agency, does not have the money to go and provide relief, yet our government went and just spent that amount of money, this like $8 billion, on expanding the war, rewarding Israel for expanding this horrific war, this genocidal war in the Middle East. So, out on the campaign trail now, I think the biggest issue out there is housing, and people feel like they are hanging on by a thread to their housing. People are severely economically stressed now, trying to pay the cost of housing. Yet in this country, we stopped supporting public housing, low-income housing. We stopped supporting it back in the Bill Clinton term, where we passed a law forbidding that any public dollars could be used on public housing anymore. So, the bottom has fallen out of our housing supply because of just terrible priorities, serving the big developers essentially in Congress and in the White House. So these are fixable things, but we are seeing people just so hurting this. Students, a recent poll showed that in the US, students or young people under age 25 consider themselves hopeless. 50% report that they consider themselves hopeless about the future, and 25% have considered harming themselves within 2 weeks of that survey. And that just tells you what an absolutely desperate situation young people in this country in particular are facing, in many areas around the world. But, in this country where costs are so high and communities have really been devastated by development and corporatization and gentrification, the things that make life worth living are just not, they are in terribly short order now. And people are really, really struggling. So that's why, this is such a perfect storm right now for political change, because people are really kind of at their wits' end. And in spite of what Biden and Harris will tell you about Bidenomics, it just doesn't reflect at all where real people are.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aisa. And now we have Ninoska Marcano. Ninoska, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get the video going here. Okay. Hi, Dr. Stein. And thank you so much for allowing this conversation to take place this morning. Just kind of following up with the question you had regarding the sanctions, as you know, the outcomes of the 2024 election could change the public policy landscape, as you well have pointed out. And in regards to, it's a sort of combination between immigration and, foreign policies that you may adopt if, in fact, you win, the elections. So, as you know, after July 28th, Venezuela held democratic elections, and the democratic Venezuelans prove that they voted out President Nicolas Maduro, who has failed to show, the results, legitimate results of the elections. And in fact, it's not just the Carter Center, but several other organizations have validated the fact that he did not or was not the legitimate winner of the elections. Having said that, we know that after July 28th, for the past 3 months, there has been an extraordinary increase in the human rights violation, which has left 1,936 people who are now political prisoners, which include women and children. In addition to military staff. The situation is sincerely out of control and, worrisome, not only, in the country, but also here in the US, because as you know, this is connected to the displacement of all these immigrants and Venezuelans who've crossed the Darien just to get here. So having said that, my question to you is, can you tell us what your immigration policies will look like, for these millions of Venezuelans seeking asylum in this country, and now given these new circumstances, because lifting the sanction seems you would be helping a now openly authoritarian and autocratic regime. And second of all, with these sanctions, how would people perceive the Green Party if you still have a discourse of lifting sanctions to a country that openly, is being targeted and being pointed by several very reputable organizations as a human rights violator?
So let me just say that, there are mixed reports about Venezuela and the elections. Now, I have not been back to revisit those reports recently, so I don't want to give a definite final position on this. But at last, my campaign was aware there were definitely mixed reports. And because the U.S. has had such a catastrophic track record of interfering in other countries, I think it's important to err on the side of non-interference, barring, really clear evidence, and even let me say, there are lots of countries out there that we are in full support of that are extremely anti-democratic, consider the Shah of Iran, for example, or Saudi Arabia right now. There are plenty of countries that have horrific governments where we do not interfere. So regardless of the government, I would be very cautious about interference, and that includes sanctions. And let me just say that what we know from sanctions is that they don't affect the political elites. Sanctions affect everyday people, and if you've got an abusive government in power, sanctions are not felt by that government. Sanctions are largely felt by the everyday people. So the most important thing that we would do, and which we are committed to right now, is ending the sanctions, which we know have been killing people in Venezuela for a long time. And we would reverse those sanctions expeditiously so that the suffering of the people of Venezuela is reduced and people are not forced to migrate out of, economic emergency circumstances.
But that's basing on, and just to follow up on the fact that the sanctions actually do affect, the population, versus the fact that this is a political strategy and policy by those in power, because Venezuela has actually given very clear, signs of being an autocratic country. And what about the political prisoners, Ms. Stein? They are a reality. They are currently in one of the worst jails in Latin America. And just the mere displacement of the Venezuelans, there are over 7 million Venezuelans, of which many are here in the States. How would you, adjust to a reality that is so rapidly changing?
So let me say first, we know that sanctions do not advance the resistance to the government. If the government is unjust, sanctions do not have a track record for actually improving the power of the people to overturn that government. That's always been the rationale for that, but that has never been proven to be the case. And you can look, for example, at Cuba and its long history of sanctions, which have certainly not assisted in overturning the Cuban government. Yet sanctions, we know, are very effective in starving people and enforcing poverty. So sanctions, in general, we do not think is an effective tool, even if you're quite convinced that the government is unjust. And if you're talking about jails, we could look at the jails in Israel, where there are tens of thousands of Palestinians, who are locked up in the most horrific and unbelievably abusive circumstances. So there are plenty of examples where the U.S. government supports countries, Saudi Arabia, for example, where the governments are not just. So in general, we favor a policy of non-intervention, and sanctions are, in fact, against international law. So unless there were some very compelling circumstance, which was clear cut, we would be reversing those sanctions.
And in regards to the recognition that the opposition leader actually won versus Maduro having won, is there a possibility that you could share what your stand on that is?
As I said, I have not seen evidence to that effect yet. I haven't recently revisited the data on that election, but at last that I saw, it was not at all clear cut that this was an illegitimate outcome of the election. So I would have to reserve, any statement about that at this time.
Okay.
Thank you,
right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ninoska. And before your final remarks, Dr. Stein, I'd like to ask you if you support war visas for undocumented immigrants. They been living here in the United States for many years. The dreamers are getting old. And while you work on immigration reform, I think these people need some kind of work permit. And also for migrant workers, what kind of protection are you plan to offer to migrant workers? Because nobody cares also about people who work in the field. Thank you.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So, we support the protection of migrant workers. We support unions for migrant workers and good wages and healthcare for migrant workers, really for everyone in this country. And we support a policy that allows people to come across the border if they pass background checks and to be able to work. So where we would like to go is not to require special work permits, but to allow people to come to this country if they are in good standing, that they should be able to get papers to work. And in terms of, amnesty for people who've been undocumented in this country, the dreamers who are really in limbo right now, we recognize that U.S. policy had a major hand in generating that migration to start with that forced people to leave their communities and to come here. So for purposes of general justice, as well as purposes for the stability of our communities and people who've been here for a long time, we favor, a pathway to citizenship, which is prompt and efficient, and allows people to continue to maintain their lives, their families, and their role in their communities. So we would be very protective of immigrants who basically come here without papers because they've been forced to do that in an unfriendly migration system. Our goal is to stabilize the drivers of migration so that people do not continue to be forced, but let's deal justly with people who are already here, and let's ensure that they can lead dignified and secure lives, being major contributors to their communities and their economies. We know that migrants are a massive economic generator in this country. And it's important for us to appreciate them and to allow them to continue to serve the roles that they're serving and to live dignified lives out and come out from the shadows and the dangers that are associated with being undocumented. We need to move forward, with an amnesty and a pathway to citizenship for people who are already here.
Thank you, Dr. Stein. I hope, there are many questions, but I hope you give us an opportunity the next time to share with us your ideas. And now you have your final 3 minutes, your closing remarks and your message for the Latino voters.
So, my message to Latino voters is that you deserve a fair shake. You are hardworking, that so many in the Latino community came here because they were forced to come here, or they were born here to parents who were forced to come here and endured incredible hardship and danger in order to establish your families and to have a secure future. And the track record of the Latino community is, the highest order of citizenship and economic contribution. You deserve healthcare as a human right, like any other American citizen. You deserve housing, which is affordable. You deserve quality education. You deserve protection in the workplace. You deserve to come out from the shadows if you are in the shadows, if you are undocumented, if you have DACA and you're not sure what your future is. You deserve security. And as part of that, we would cut our military budget and ensure that we are putting our tax dollars to work here, knowing that our immigrant community, our Latino community, is very much a part of the economic generator that makes our communities prosperous. So again, we thank you for bringing the richness and the cultural diversity that truly makes America great. We thank you for bringing that to this country, and we look forward to a dignified and secure future that works for all of us, including especially the Latino community, as well as its most marginalized members, particularly in the farm worker community, which also deserves real security and protection. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And I'll just mention, please go to jillstein2024.com and you can find out more there, and you can help get the word out that there is a campaign that will really serve the interests of this community, and we can go a long way to change the political landscape, even in just the remaining 2 weeks or so of this campaign.
Thank you, Dr. Stein, and I hope we can talk to you before the elections. Have a great day and enjoy your weekend. And for everybody, for all the journalists, thank you for spending this Saturday evening, Dr. Stein.
Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Great talking with all of you. Really appreciate it.
Take care.
Take care. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.